Hi everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And recently I've been watching a lot of different YouTube channels making tomato sauce. And I found myself asking the question, why are they doing it the hard way? Now, when I first started making tomato sauce, I pulled out a cookbook, probably Joy of Cooking or something like that, and it explained how you could get your tomatoes, get a pot of boiling water, maybe score your skin on the tomatoes, do a quick dip, it makes the tomato skins peel off, and then you could make, do any kind of trimming you needed to do on the tomatoes, and make really good sauce. And that's what I did. I did that for probably, I don't know, 20 years. And somewhere along the line, I think I was reading one of the seed catalogs, probably Burpee in those days. And they were selling special hand-cranked machines for making tomato sauce and other things. I looked at a couple of them and I was like, wow, that is just too cool, and it was totally out of my price range. And it wasn't that expensive back then, but it was totally out of my price range. Eventually I saved my pennies and I got one. And 20 years later I still have it. 25 years later actually. Maybe it was luck, maybe I just take good care of my equipment, but when I was looking at the various machines that were available, I was looking for something that was solid and that had some versatility. I'll show you an up-close picture of the name here. And I get nothing from this. These people don't know me from Adam. I'm pretty sure they still exist. This is the company. It's a food strainer and sauce maker. Now, the reason I chose this particular model, it used a metal screen to remove seeds and squish the pulp. The pulp comes out of here. What that means is I bought an additional set of the metal screens. So if I'm making blackberry something or another, I hate blackberry seeds, I really do. So I've got a screen that will take the seeds out of blackberry goo and let me make jams and jellies without seeds. There's another one that you can take cooked pumpkin and squash, the winter squash, and run it through, and it'll take the seeds out of that. So I like the versatility. Now, I won't tell you that this machine is for everybody. If you like cool things to use in your kitchen, sure, this is a cool thing. Now, it's not motorized. You can get a motor for it. And in fact, I think I own a motor for it. But to be honest, I never bother. Now, maybe if I got the harvest of the century, I would bother. But cranking a crank is really not that big a deal to me. I would say this is not for everyone. I would say if you're going to make one pot of tomato sauce and eat it fresh, don't bother buying this. Not unless you just love kitchen things. But if you process fruits and vegetables on a regular basis, if you make sauces and jellies and jams from fruit that has seeds, this might be your ticket. Remember what I said. The traditional way is you take your pot of boiling water and you take a paring knife and you make some slits in the tomato, and then you dip the tomatoes in the hot water, the boiling water, for like a minute. Then you scoop them out and the skins will peel off of them. Cool. And then you get to core, take out any cores or anything else that you don't want in your sauce. okay. How about we do this instead? I have a tomato. It's been washed. It's dried. Doesn't have anything wrong with it. Smells really good. I'm going to cut it into a couple of chunks. And I'm going to keep doing that with some of its friends here. If there's anything on the tomato that's a little iffy, something that looks like it might be a little moldy, I'll cut that off. Like this one, I think this damage is actually from the hailstorm that we had the other day. It's bruised, but it smells perfectly fine, so I'm not going to worry about it. That's the one thing I really watch for is, does it smell okay? And you'll see me sniff a lot when I do this. A lot of times I cut tomatoes in half and I smell them. And I know what a fermented tomato smells like. And if I have any doubts about a tomato, I toss it. I'm not going to risk ruining tomato sauce because I was trying to get too much out of a batch here. I look at every tomato. Oh, these smell so good. Why do I cut them? Well, I have done it without cutting them before. And to be honest, it puts a lot more strain on the machine. I'd like this thing to last for another 30 years or so. I can get replacement parts. I discovered that again. Let's see. I discovered that about 5 years ago. I was at Lehman's in Ohio, Kidron, Ohio. They have an online presence. I have not tried to get replacement parts from them online, but I'm sure can work it out for you. But they have replacement parts for this tomato sauce maker. You can get anything that's plastic on here that might break, anything that might wear out, like there's a gasket in there. I think you could just about rebuild the entire machine. I got a new gasket for it because that seemed like a sensible thing. I actually own a couple of them. What else did I get? Oh, I got a new plastic end where the pulp comes out because eventually they'll crack. I mean, this is the original one from the machine, so can't complain too much. What else can you say lasted 25, 30 years without any problem? Like I say, I'm checking any spots that I have any doubts about. Now, remember, if I was doing this the old-fashioned way, I'd have to boil and peel every single tomato. Whoops. Jack is wondering why there's a tomato rolling across the floor. Oh my goodness, Jack. Oh my goodness. Let's rinse that poor little boy off. The floor's not that clean. Oh, I've got a few in there now. I'll bring you guys in close and let you see what happens next, because this is kind of cool. Okay, now remember, in that hopper, I've got tomatoes. I'm going to smush down from the top, and I'm going to crank this. We have pulp. All the seeds and skins are right here. I'm going to use a plastic scraper to control this goop. And normally I don't bother to stop in the middle of this very often. Now my hands are completely clean. I'm going to scoop that in here, and I'm going to run this pulp and seeds. Get you up close here. See, that's the cores, that's the tops, that's the seeds, the skins. I'm going to run through here again because there's still a surprising amount of moisture in there. And it depends partially. These are fairly dry tomatoes because these are mostly paste tomatoes. But I add in whatever is ripe at the time. So there's cherry tomatoes in there, there's pear tomatoes in there, there's Inca, there's Roma, there's San Marzano, there's Alaskan Fancy, there's just all kinds of stuff. Whoops. It is important to put this underneath there though. And you know you're going to make a mess when you do this, but that's part of the making tomato sauce. If I have to say, if you're not willing to make a mess, you should not try to make tomato sauce because it's just not going to work. Now, I'm going to run it through. Usually I run it through twice, and then this goes into the compost. That's it. Surprising number of these tomato seeds are still viable, as we have found in previous years. Now, that is gone through again and still produced a little bit of tomato pulp. Now, all I'm going to do and as sort of a secret, what I do is when I am going to transfer this to a pot, I actually tilt this up like that. Otherwise, it'll drip on your counter, and I'm trying not to drip. I know that's silly, that I should care about whether I drip or not. Now all I have to do, see how thick that is already? And I'll start cooking it. And I'll start it on low. And I'll go back to this process here. It really surprised me when I saw all these people still doing the same thing that I did, 40 years ago. And that 40 years ago process makes 100% sense if you're just doing a small batch and that's all you're going to do. But some of the people who are still doing the old-fashioned style, man, they are producing quarts and quarts and quarts and quarts and quarts and quarts of tomato sauce for their family. I don't see the point in working any harder than I have to. I'm going to finish going through here. And I also have a batch of tomatoes here. Now these tomatoes have been frozen, and they are now officially not frozen anymore. I made sure before I put these in that there was nothing wrong with any of them. No rotten spots, nothing. And these are all ready to go. I froze them because at the time I didn't have enough tomatoes to make it worthwhile to do a batch, because you make a mess when you do a batch, let's be honest. And you make your kitchen nice and warm and all that sort of stuff. So I just took one of these freezer bags that has kind of the wide base to it. They've become kind of popular lately, and I'm not going to save that last little bit there. I know it's got some tomato juice in it, but I am going to rinse this out though and dry it, and use it for freezing future batches of tomatoes. I try not to use too much plastic, and this is just one of those easy ways to make that serve longer. Now this will juice a lot faster than the other ones will because they've already been frozen, so the cell walls have been destroyed by the freezing process. Now, if you want to make chunky tomato sauce, you're still going to have to do some hand processing. Skinning and stuff like that, because this turns everything to mush. Now, there is a screen that you can use for this called salsa, and I have not tried it. It's supposed to create much bigger pieces. What we prefer for regular tomato sauce, like on pizza for instance, is a smooth sauce. So this is perfect for us. If you want chunky sauces, if you want to can what they call crushed tomatoes or something like that, yeah, you're going to have to do it the old way. But for those times when you want to make tomato paste or smooth sauce. This is definitely the ticket. When I think about how many hours I spent doing the old peeling tomato trick. And you know, the hot water and peeling the tomato works like a charm, but it's another step. It's another excuse to get your house nice and warm on an already warm day. As you can see, I'm just sort of casually tossing the tomato seeds and skin back in there. And the nice thing about this funnel is you can't get your fingers in where it'll get squished. You can only kind of grab the part where, because the squishing happens in here. I'm sure someone could try it, like take off the plastic guard or something like that, but the guard is there to provide a way for the stems or whatever else you've got coming out to come out and flop into a bowl. I'm going to run it through one more time, and that's it. And then this section will go into the pot with its buddies. Now, I don't have a huge collection of tomatoes today. I've got a whole stack that are going to be coming off in the next week, but I didn't want to let it get too far behind because I also have to make a bunch of other things like pickles and stuff. So I'm trying to keep ahead a little bit and not make too big a project for myself all at once. Nice. You may wonder, what do you do if you get a tomato that started to dehydrate? There's nothing wrong with it. It was dead ripe, but we live in a dry climate, so having your tomatoes dehydrate is a fairly common issue here. If it's not rotten, just use it. You've just saved yourself some work cooking it down, that's all. Smells wonderful. In it goes. Itty bitty guy. I saw him out there this morning and I said, oh, that was good. Yeah. Don't let him go to waste just because he's itty bitty. He would have been fine in the sauce too, but he deserved a starring role. And that's about the only thing I worry about. There's no mold, there's no bugs, no fermentation. Blemishes on the skin are not a problem because the skin's being discarded. I know that in commercially produced tomato sauce, they put all kinds of stuff that we would just be totally gacked out about into our tomato sauce. However, that's not the point. The point here is to produce a really nice tomato sauce. You know, this tomato has a soft spot, and I don't know how much of it's going to be salvageable. Nope. I can smell the fermentation in this one. So this guy will go right into the compost. Tilt it up to avoid drippage. Pour this in the pot with its buddies. And start the cleanup. Now cleanup in this case means I'm going to scrape this here. I do recommend getting this into water as soon as possible because tomato juice, if it dries on, is kind of a pain. But I'm going to take these things apart, put them in the sink. This is the piece I've got a replacement for. It has a crack on it, but I will probably keep using it until it disintegrates. Because why not? You can see the screen now. With the cover off, I can just scrape it all the way around nice and neat. Fling some around the room, of course, because that's what you always do with tomato sauce. But try not to fling too much. Unscrew that. Let's see, this comes apart which way? Clockwise. I had to think about that for a minute. And that's it. The rest of this thing gets flushed with water. we're done. There's always a little bit left in here, but I figure if you've cranked it through enough times, you've gotten the vast majority of the goods out. And the rest of this just gets thrown into the sink, just as if you would a meat grinder or anything else like that. But man, beats the heck out of the boiling water technique is my book. Now this year we're planning to can as much tomato sauce as we can. What I like to do is actually an 8-ounce container of the small ones, the little bitty guys, is just about perfect for us for pizza on Friday night. So I know what sizes to can things in from experience. My goal is to have pizza sauce for the year and tomato sauce for some sort of a spaghetti or whatever once a week for the year. Now, when I look at the year, I have to consider like slopping over into next summer, because you never know how quick your tomatoes are going to come off and things like that. So my goal is always to be finishing up the previous year's stored vegetables or sauces or whatever when I'm harvesting the first from the next year. That way, if things are slow, you know. Now, if I have a bumper crop, I will can everything I possibly can. There was a year, probably 10 years ago maybe, when we had the perfect tomato summer, and I canned 2.5 years worth of tomato sauce. But that's okay, because it means the next year I had more room in my garden to experiment with other things, because our garden was way smaller then. I had more room in my garden to experiment with other things. That's cool. It just means you don't have to work quite as hard the next year, or you have more time for making pickles or some other thing. And some years it'll be a fail. It's just the nature of the beast. So it lets you, by planning ahead that way, you're less likely to get caught having to buy something at the grocery store that you don't want to, or that you can't because they don't have it at the grocery store. So now what I'm going to do is get this in the sink before it clots. Take a quick peek in the pot. That's us already. Let's see here. You know, goodly long way to go. Woo, fogging up my lens. But now I can just let this start to cook down, and when it's cooked down, then I'm going to can it.